Welcome, friends, to the Hidden Power of Language. Our final session, session 5, the language of conflict. So why is this our final session? Well, a couple of reasons. I thought it was a good way to wrap it up. And then just full transparency, full honesty. It's been very challenging. Like with multiple people in the house, multiple animals in the house. As you all know, COVID has changed so many things. And so we're doing things at home. I no longer have my quiet home to work out of. So directly behind me in the bathroom, my daughter is bathing the dog. This is my recording time, but it's okay. I thought, I'm just going to record. If you hear banging or blow drying or barking, my husband is in right the next room editing pictures. They both have music going on. And so I just thought, you know what, this is a good time for us to just be, just end our sessions. And so that's what we're doing. So I am going to start today with a video again of my favorite show ever, which you now know, Big Bang Theory. And my question for you about this with the language of conflict is this what we want?
Are there any questions?
Yeah, what the hell was that?
Any other questions?
Dr. Sheldon Cooper here. I am the lead author of this particular paper. Thank you. And you, sir, you have completely skipped over the part where I was walking through the park and I saw these children on a merry-go-round, which started me thinking about the moment of inertia in gases like helium at temperatures approaching absolute zero.
I didn't skip it. It's just an anecdote. It's not science.
Oh, I see. It was the apple falling on Newton's head. Was that just an anecdote?
You are not Isaac Newton.
No, that's true. Gravity would have been apparent to me without the apple.
You cannot possibly be that arrogant.
You continue to underestimate me, my good man.
Look, if you weren't happy with my presentation, then maybe you should have given it with me.
As I've explained repeatedly, unlike you, I don't need validation from lesser minds. No offense.
Really? So why did you come?
Because I knew you'd screw this up.
Well, I didn't screw it up.
Oh, please. I admit that spherical chicken joke, that was hilarious. But it was straight downhill from there.
You know, I've had enough of your condescension. Maybe I didn't go to college when I was 11, like you. Maybe I got my doctorate at 24 instead of 16. But you are not the only person who is smarter than everyone else in this room. No offense. And I am clearly not the only person who is tormented by insecurity and has an ego in need of constant validation.
So you admit you're an egotist?
Yes! My name is Dr. Leonard Hofstadter, and I could never please my parents, so I need to get all my self-esteem from strangers like you. But he's worse!
Okay, that is it.
Stop it! You cannot blow up my head with your mind.
Then I'll settle for an aneurysm.
Stop it.
You hit me. You saw that? He hit me.
Trying to blow up my head.
So it was working.
It wasn't. It was not. You are a nutcase.
Oh, see about that. Heads up, you people in the front row. This is a splash zone.
Stop it. Quit it.
Is this usually how these physics things go?
More often than you think.
Isn't that awesome? So my question, as I now get my PowerPoint loaded and share that screen with you, is, oops, as I said before, is this what we want? Is this how conflict is supposed to look? And so I'm going to go ahead and tell you the answer to that would be no. That is not what we want. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that just the best show ever? So let's talk a little bit about the language of conflict. Because honestly, if the world was just all puppies and roses and fun and joy, which I believe life should be full of joy, but if there were never any conflict, then we probably wouldn't need classes like this. So I Googled, I like to, before I start sessions and talk about topics, I like to find out what is being said. Like if someone were to Google conflict or managing conflict or difficulties in the workplace or whatever it is, what are some of the things that come up? One of the things that I found is that many, I guess I shouldn't say most, many sessions about this are titled Dealing with Difficult People. And look at some of the words that we use to talk about other people. These are just a few that I found, descriptors of people who might be involved with conflict. We call people martyrs. We call people clams, snipers, the chronic complainer, the volcano who erupts. I was doing a medical staff thing once, and once at MD stands for major deity. Someone is the root of evil. Then, no, I'm not gonna. See, I wanted to pull something up here. I will tell you, I was having trouble finding some of my things this morning. So I hope that I am still sharing just my PowerPoint with you. So I couldn't find the book I wanted to read out of or anything, but I did. So then I Googled dealing with difficult people at work, and I got 717 million results. Sessions called Dealing with Difficult People sort of automatically puts you in this place of superiority and being irritated. Now, there are people in the workplace who are going to give you problems. There are. But if it's problems like the sniper or the volcano who erupts at you, or someone who is causing you such grief, and you've tried things and you aren't having any results, I mean, there are true instances of workplace bullying, and that's a whole different thing. And I'm going to post a link as we're on our session today. So if you're watching me, I forgot to say this earlier, you might be watching me on Facebook Watch Party in my group, Facebook Watch Party on my page, or YouTube. But wherever you're watching, I will post a link to a podcast I did a while back with a wonderful woman named Donna Clark Love. She's a bullying expert, and her session was amazing. And she really talks about the difference between dealing with behavior that is just difficult, that you can have an effect on, and dealing with true workplace bullying. And she gives you lots of great tips and tricks. So I'm going to post that for you. If you are, I hope that my PowerPoint is sharing. I think a big issue here is that we look at everything as being what happened in Big Bang Theory. You don't realize you're thinking it, but when it comes to having conversations that we call conflict, we think of disagreement, but then we escalate it in our head to an argument and somebody trying to blow up your head, or, you know, fighting, or any of those things. This book, I think I've mentioned before, it's called Toward a New Psychology of Women, but it is not just about women. And I couldn't find the book. We just have chaos in the house. So I did copy and paste it into a Microsoft document. I don't know if you're seeing the PowerPoint on my screen. I hope you're still seeing the PowerPoint. But this is a book written by a woman I love. Her name is Judith Baker Miller. And she talks about, for all of us, not just for women, that we tend to look at conflict as being bad. So I want to read a few things that she says. She says, conflict, seen in its fullest sense, is not necessarily threatening or destructive. Conflict itself can appear threatening and destructive. It is more likely, however, that it becomes dangerous when its necessity has been suppressed. And this is a lot of times that whole I'm not mad thing. And it also is influenced by your personality style. You know, the cappuccino, we said, is more likely to maybe hold things back because their concern is about the relation. Also, women tend to hold things back a little bit more. So we're suppressing it, is what she's saying. It then tends to explode in an extreme form on the societal and on the individual level. On the contrary, or on the individual level, so she's talking about, no, it doesn't need to be this way, quite the contrary. On the individual level, the infant would never grow if it interacted with a mirror image of itself. Growth requires that engagement with difference and with people embodying that difference. If differences were more openly acknowledged, we could allow for and even encourage an increasingly strong expression by each party of her or his experience. This would lead to greater clarity for self, greater ability to fulfill one's own needs, more facility to respond to others. There would be a chance at individual and mutual satisfaction, growth, and yes, even joy. So what she's saying is, what we perceive as conflict, like the Big Bang clip, is really what happens when we suppress conflict. Conflict really just meaning a disagreement. You see things differently. And when we suppress that and don't allow for it and don't acknowledge it and don't learn it and don't encourage it, then we suppress it both on an individual and on a societal level. And then it comes out like this volcano. So what is the difference between a disagreement, which I am going to go ahead and assign what should be as conflict, just a disagreement? What's the difference between that and an argument? Well, underlying that, before I just talk about that, I wanted to revisit the risks. And I did this before, so I'm going to do it very, very fast. In fact, I'm going to skip this slide. I just want to revisit the risks. When we think about having language and speaking up during conflict, here are some of the risks that we need to make sure bubble to the surface, and we address that. The risk that you won't be liked. The risk that you'll be labeled as a troublemaker. The risk that will actually increase the problem, which in reality, it typically just changes the problem. The risk that you might lose your job. And then personally, the risk that the relationship will end or someone will be hurt. The risk that it will become an argument, which is what we just talked about, rather than a disagreement. And then the hidden risks, I think those other ones are hidden as well if you don't acknowledge them, but these are risks you may not have thought about before. Sometimes when we hold on to a superior, what we think is a superior position. And with conflict, that is so often the case because we said it's a disagreement, right? You and I see things differently. And as human beings, we tend to think that our position is right, which means we tend to be in a position of authority. So part of the risk of addressing conflict is that if I address it, then my power is gone, that I might be wrong or partially responsible, and that he or she will never change anyway, so don't do anything. But what if they do change? Then I've lost that position of superiority. So we talked a little bit about that before. So what is the difference then between conflict or a simple disagreement versus an argument? Well, a disagreement is something that can be discussed. So you and I, or you and this other person don't agree, but it can be discussed. That's a disagreement. It's something that you can have, this disagreement, and still respect each other's opinions. That's the way you would hope it would go in politics. You know, political differences can be based on just philosophical differences in the way you look at the world. But it would be great, or in business or families or anything, that you could still respect the other person. It's when both parties express their opinions without getting emotional or angry, that the other person will not see things the same way. So it's a conversation when you express your opinion, but there's not a, what about an argument? When one person intends to convince or persuade the other person to agree with their point of view, which is so often how we go into the conversation, is believing that we're right. Listen, I do this. If you don't at least occasionally do this, then you are a wonderful, wonderful person and more emotionally mature than I am. But I oftentimes still enter the beginning, like mind process, with how I'm going to convince the other person that I'm right. And that can lead to an argument. It's what occurs when you don't agree to disagree, but you're determined to make that person agree with you. It is also called a beef, a blow up, a brawl, a dispute. So these are the differences. I would love for you to put in the comments section, just based on those descriptions, whether you more often engage in disagreements or arguments. It might take you a little bit of time to think through it, but I hope, as always, when you're self-assessing, when you're trying to get to the root of some of the language issues, that you'll go ahead and admit if it really is that you engage more in an argument than a disagreement. And listen, what I'm saying here is, like, if you hold back, like we talked about before, like you just suppress and suppress and suppress, and then it blows up into an argument, then you got to say you engage more in arguments. People who engage more often in disagreements would be saying that you've learned some of these skills. I hope that makes sense. So what do I have to offer to you during this last bit of our time together? Well, I do want to focus more on language and words, and I am watching the timer. But we've got to I really believe that just giving you words or just some techniques is not going to help if we don't get to the root of what's going on inside. So here's what I encourage you to do. Pick a situation that is causing you some difficulty in your life. Take a few minutes, 10 or 15, and process it. Write it all down, including things like what happens. And when we're saying what happens, please be factual. Let me go back to what I shared with you last week. I talked to you about a woman I was working with, and at a women's conference in front of 100 women, she said, "What's up with your hair?" to me in front of all those women. So if I take time to write it down, when I say what happens, and this was, there were several things that she had said to me that were very derogatory. So if I wrote down what happens and I said something like, "She attacks me," do you see how that is not what happens? That is not fact oriented. That is the way it makes me feel. An attack is an emotional word. Saying an attack indicates that she has a motive. And I'm going to stop right there for a minute. You remember what I said last session or the session before? It's not people's behavior that gets on their nerves, our nerves, or I'm going to add to it, or makes us angry or causes us grief. It's the motive we assign to it. So let's say with this woman that I already knew she was going to say that because we set it up. She still would have said, "What's up with your hair?" It's not the words that upset me, it's the motive behind it. So what I would need to write down, what would be a better choice is saying, she is criticizing me publicly. See, that's a fact. How it makes me feel. It made me feel angry, embarrassed, attacked. Write down as many things as you want to. What would I have liked to have happened? Okay, this is another thing that can affect our language, is that when we're thinking about how we want somewhat a behavior, right now I'm just addressing behavior, which is really the root of conflict. Sorry about that noise. What was I saying? Oh, what would like to have happen? Oftentimes we say we want the person to be more respectful. We don't want them to be rude. Do you see how those are very subjective terms? What does that even mean for someone to be respectful or not to be rude? Rude is a different set of behaviors for one person versus another. So I would need to be very specific. What would I like to have happen? For her to decrease her criticisms of me publicly. Maybe if I say stop, that's a huge thing, but I want to see them decrease. How would I like to feel? I would like to feel confident when we're working together. How the other person might see this situation. Maybe she saw that I did ask, because I asked in this session for someone to engage me in a difficult conversation. Maybe she saw that that's what I wanted and that's what she did. Maybe I had done something to offend her. Maybe the other person feels like I had said something. Do you see, you need to get in the other person's head, how they might feel. She might feel her feelings had been hurt, or maybe she felt good because she was helping. All those things. Process it. Now decide that, okay, yes, you want to speak up. Now, if you don't want to speak up, and I told you this last time, there are things in my world that are causing me grief that I have chosen, do you hear the word chosen? Not to speak up about. That's okay as long as you know you're choosing it. And all I would say about that is, continue to process until you're ready. Continue to learn until you're ready. Continue to grow until you're ready. Let's say that I'm ready to speak up. I want to speak up. Then pick a technique that you want to use. Okay, and I'm going to go through techniques in just a second, but I wanted to say one more thing about being challenged in front of others. Again, based on this hair thing I was telling you about, we got to develop some mental skills. If you're challenged in front of other people, your adrenaline goes up, your language, sometimes it's very difficult to create what to say. So just a few mental skills that I would love for you to develop is always ask yourself if they have a point. And also sometimes people will challenge you in front of other people if they don't feel they're included. So that could have been the case with this woman too. Sometimes people in a group will lash out at you if they feel like, if they don't feel that they're included, they can lash out at you, they can sabotage you, they can bring others along with them, they can stop being productive, and there are many other behaviors you can see. So just a few mental skills. So verbally, what can you do? As I tell you to pick some techniques. If you're challenged in front of others, some verbal skills I want you to have is, first of all, is a 3-second pause. And it's about that long. Sometimes we feel like if we're challenged in front of other people, if we don't open our mouth right away, they won. No, they didn't win. If you open your mouth and spew out words that don't create an identity that you want because you decided that a couple of sessions ago, then day one, you lost if you don't take time to pause. And then remember power phrases that I talked about before. We've got to build words. We've got to, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So this word power phrases, I don't think I defined it before. I will put a link. I mentioned it last session, put a link, but my store wasn't working. So hopefully by the time you're watching this now, my store is working. But power phrases, this is a woman named Merrill Runyon who wrote it. A short, specific, focused expression that says what you mean and means what you say without being mean when you say it. Let me show you some examples. So that day when she said, "What's up with your hair?" I remembered a section in her book that I had read called Responding to Challenging Questions. And there were several in there. And I remembered one that said, "Why do you ask that?" Now, I didn't say it exactly that way. I said, "What would make you ask me something like that?" If I had not read that, listen, I just don't know. I had been learning and growing since I had been working with this particular seminar company. And reading that helped build powerful language. So let me go one step further. The next thing she said was, "Well, I don't know, turn around. Everything about you looks unprofessional." Another 3-second pause. And the next phrase that I found, gosh, I'm sorry, I thought these were circled. And I said to her, when she said, "Look around you, everything about you is unprofessional." And I said, "Well, I do want to hear what you have to say, but not the pot shots." And that was based on, okay, "Oh, I am interested in your opinions, but not your insults." So I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I remembered the gist of it. Do you see all these words that we can use? I thought I heard a dig, did I? That remark hurts because I care about your opinion, and it sounds like you're trying to discourage me. If you have an issue, let's discuss it directly. Some of these are long, some of these are short. And let me tell you something Merrill Runyon said on a podcast I did with her a while back. I'll put a link to that as well. She said, if I wrote another book, I might say power phrases with grace, because I felt like I was a little bit harsh with some of the things that I wrote. I love that she said that, because back to what we talked about before about factors that influence our language choices, your personality style, whether you're more relational or more task-oriented, your gender, the way you were raised, the identity that you want to create. Some of these phrases you would never use because of that, or you would never choose to use. Some of them you would love, some of them you could change. But the important point is, and the reason I keep calling this the hidden power, is we need to learn. We need to decide what words we're using, especially when we're being challenged and we're having conflict. So this section that I've done right here is really, I guess I would call conflict in the moment, unexpected conflict, being in front of people when there's conflict and having words to say. Vocally, I would encourage you, this particular session is about language. All of these sessions are about language. But still, remember some things about your voice. Slow down, drop your pitch, because sometimes, especially, I will say women, our voice goes up, and all of us go faster. So make it a choice to slow down, lower your voice a little bit, and then your body language, hands, arms, and the head nod. So hands up here tend to be perceived as being aggressive. So we don't want that. Hands, you can't see me on here, but hands sort of down around your waist are seen as confident. Arms not waving all around, arms down. The head nod. So as you're listening, sometimes we tend to nod really fast when we're upset. So do a very slow, confident kind of head nod. These are choices. So that was conflict that you're not expecting and that happens sometimes in front of others. Arm yourself with powerful language. Now this, I'm going to put another document in the comment sections. I may put different documents depending on where you're watching. But what about, for example, this woman that is saying things to me and criticizing me? What about having conversations that you prepare for? What about saying to yourself, okay, I spoke up in the moment, I was able to say something, but I think we need to have a longer conversation so that this stops happening. This behavior is upsetting me. I want to be a confident person. I want to be a person who doesn't hold things in and then blow up violently because I've allowed conflict to fester. I've developed good language in the moment. How can I have good language when I'm preparing to have a sit-down conversation? And I developed something called press. And I did that because I think of a beautiful flower, and to take it to the next level and keep it so that I have it whenever it's ready, I press it, press flowers. So let me just kind of go quickly through this, and then I'll post some documents for you all to just look at some examples, but I'll use the one with the hair. The first step is to prepare. That is all the things that we've already done. Going through that, learning language, actually everything we've done, looking at your personality style, looking at other factors that influence the way that you choose language, looking at your identity, looking at choosing words intentionally. All of these things feed in, you know, what is language, feed into preparing. But I would say on the shorter term, preparing means to really look at the situation. Like I said earlier, spend 10, 15 minutes, write down all of those things, just prepare, and do this when you're out of an emotional state. The RESS is actually what you're going to write out and what you're going to say. So the letter R stands for relay the information. You're going to take this from what you prepped with earlier. The letter E, explain why you're bugged. The letter S, say something positive. We as human beings respond better if we hear something that is positive. It's not about sucking up. It's not about being weak. It's not about lying. It's about keeping the conversation going. And then finally, saying what you need. Now I'm going to close my timer. I said it was about to go off so that I would have 5 minutes left. So we're now at the 5-minute mark. So what you do is you sit down, you write all this out, you ask the person for a time to chat, you sit down and you say these things. Now you don't have the paper in front of you. You don't count off RESS. You rehearse it. You make it your style. You make it conversational. And then you go from there. So here's what I said to this woman. So I am going to hold up my letters for you. Yesterday, when I heard you say I looked unprofessional in front of 100 women, that was the R-E, it bothered me because I thought that it damaged our credibility. The letter S. You use power phrases really well. Maybe you were trying to demonstrate that. The second letter S. The next time you come to a class, I need you to allow me to do the interacting because that's why they're there. And then I would end with, does that make sense? Let me take a quick drink. You got to make it your style. Let me say a couple things. Relaying the information. I said yesterday when I heard you say, the less you can lead with you, the better it will go. Explain why you're bugged. Remember earlier I told you that I was embarrassed, I was upset, I was angry. I could have said that, you know, yesterday when I heard you say it embarrassed me. But what I was trying to do was think of a reason that she would also hear, and to hear that it damaged our credibility, which was true, I'm not lying. I thought that she would hear that more. We want to say things that we believe the person will hear. And that is such the power of understanding other people's personality styles and other people and gender and all those things, is you want them to hear you. Say something positive. Do not lie. And don't be generic, like you're a great member of the team. You are always on time. Try to say something that relates to the issue. Like, really, she was a great power phrase teacher, and that made sense to do that. And then say what you need. This is where it's probably not going to go well if you say something like, I need you to not be rude. I need you to be more respectful. Say something very, very specific and understand what your goal is. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get from there. I am going to share back again in just a minute. So I hope that the things that I've talked about today have helped you some on this final session, because we started with, what's your style? What is language? What are factors that affect your language other than style? Choosing your words intentionally. And then I thought this was a good conglomeration of everything. in conflict, it can be the toughest time to use language in a way that lifts you up, helps you get what you want, helps you also to not be a doormat, to be kind without being weak. All of the things I hope I promised that we would do. So today, the two big things I talked about were conflict in the heat of the moment, maybe when you're not expecting it, and then having conversations. And let's just go ahead and go ahead and say, trying to not escalate it into an argument. So here is what I wanted to end with. Just as you think about your world, I thought a couple of funny things. You know, people tend to post things that are funny. I just got a notification that my microphone changed, so we'll see. But posting things like, I had my patients tested, I'm negative. I'm not sure that that's what I want when it comes to conflict. Ultimately, there's this. I tend to want things to be easy and pre-done for me. I hate when I go to the kitchen looking for food and all I find are ingredients. That's really what I've given to you today. I've given you ingredients. I've given you ingredients this whole time. I hope that you have gotten some ingredients that will help you. If you have issues, I may do a Q&A session maybe later in the week if I have enough interest. So if there's some way that I can help you, private message me or email me or text me in some way. Don't post it. I don't want you to post the issues you're struggling with directly on social media. Let me know how I can help you. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll stay in touch. And in my final relational way, I will still end with the same thing. I've enjoyed being here. I hope that you'll do well throughout the rest of your life with language, and love and hugs to you all.